Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bowtie Goat YouTube channel where if you try hard enough, you can be the next Deca Goat. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into those very confusing written event presentations and give you all the tips that you need to know to be successful. Let's dig in. All written event presentations are not created equal. In fact, some chapters call the professional selling and consulting events written events, but they're not really written events. So we need to take a look at what Deca explains to us about the rubrics for all of our presentations and how to do best. If you have a large chapter with many different types of written events, your advisor might not give you the best advice about what to present or how to present for your written event. Deca gives you good advice, but it's really tough to muddle through. So let's take a look at a cheat sheet that I've put together for all of the written events and what's expected of the presentations. So folks, since the written events can be very confusing, this written event brief helps just understand what goes on in each one of the types of events. The yellow headings are the different big types of events for the written events. And let's start with the first one, and we'll go through the events that fall into those categories, the details, how many points your presentation or paper get, and then whether the presentation is just the paper. And let's start with the first one, the professional selling and consulting events. They are actually not written events at all, but they have the same sort of problem that the written events have in that a lot of people don't know how to prepare for that presentation. First off, you can see which events fall into that category and the details. You're not doing a written paper, and this is the only one you have to do individually. You have a cluster exam and a 15-minute presentation. The presentation is 100 points straight out since they are not pre-grading a written event. And no, it's not specific to any paper you've written, but it's important to remember that there are 13 key rubric concepts or rubric components that are general enough that they apply to any one of these three events. So pay attention to what the rubric is asking you to present so that you're presenting the correct things. Then the next group is the integrated marketing campaign events. These three events on the left you can do in groups of 1, 2, 3. It's a 10-page paper, which makes it more interesting for a lot of kids. It's a marketing exam with a 15-minute presentation. The presentation is 100 points, and by and large, the presentation is the same thing as your written paper. Now, you want to present it in a way that's creative, remembering that your judge has already read your paper, so do something that's a little bit more in-depth or something that's a little bit more intriguing for the judge. Entrepreneurship, here's a good example of why these get tricky for a lot of your advisors. There's two types of entrepreneurship events. The first type is just the innovation and startup business plan. They are shorter papers, and the presentation is 100 points, and the presentation is largely the same as the rubric. You can click these links out to the left or out to the right here that will tie you in specifically to the Deca rubrics for these events. They're similar to the entire written paper, so take a look at the difference between the innovation plan and the startup business plan. For the second type of entrepreneurship event, really the business plan events, it's now a 20-page paper, still a 15-minute presentation, but here's where we start seeing some differences. The presentation is only 40 points, whereas the written event is 60 points, and you actually aren't presenting just your paper. And again, you can click the specific rubrics when you click into this Google Doc, but the rubric that you're presenting is much more concise than just your entire paper. So don't just roll into presenting your whole paper. That's going to be a pitfall for you. I had a student do one of these events previously, and this student presented just the paper, and it went okay, but you want to pay attention to what the rubric specifically is asking. The next group is the business operation research events. There are 5 of these. Again, you can see the details. Same sort of thing. Your written event gets 60 points, your presentation gets 40 points. Now, it's important to remember, the rubric here does not follow exactly your paper either, and it makes sense because there are 5 of these events, and this rubric is the same for all 5 events. So it's not going to be specific for the operations research papers, and it's really important to remember these topics change yearly. So the topic for the operations research events should be tied into your presentation, and the rubric kind of revolves around that too. Make sure you pay attention to the rubric here because that is key. The last type of events are called the project management events. 6 of them. You can see the requirements. The same sort of thing. You have 60 points for your written paper and 40 points for the presentation. And since we're trying to evaluate 6 papers with the same sort of rubric, the rubric is not specific to the paper. This rubric actually only has 5 key areas to be evaluated on. And one of them explicitly says, explain how the group applied project management tools to complete the project. But that isn't necessarily within the paper, or is not a required section in the paper. So you really want to pay attention to how this rubric is set up compared to what you would have put into your paper. Again, don't just roll into your presentations expecting that your presentation is just a summary of your paper. The judge has already read the paper. Make sure your presentation is around what is expected of you. And last bit, yes, please share this with your chapter. Please share this with your other DECA members. Anything that I can do to help you be successful in your journey to becoming the next DECA GOAT, I'd be happy to do. You can find a link to this Google Drive resource in the description of the video down below. Now that we know what DECA expects of you during your written event presentations based on the rubric, let's go over some keen tips on how to make those presentations really stand out so the judge recognizes your hard work compared to the work of others. My experience comes from the last several years helping at the state level run these events for my state. I get to see kids walking with different types of presentations, some on computers, some poster boards, some really creative models. I'm going to share some of the pitfalls that I've seen, some of the awesome work that I've seen. But I'd be remiss not to share, and I'll put this up on the screen, that these tips also come from Andrew Weatherman, who is the DECA Executive Vice President several years ago. He came in second in ICDC for a written event, and he has his ultimate written event guide that he posted on Medium several years ago. So it's important that we go through and take a look and acknowledge the work that he's done too. Here's Andrew Weatherman's Ultimate DECA Written Event Guide. If you have not seen this before, it's certainly worth the 28-minute read. There's a lot of great tips from somebody who has a lot more experience as a DECA competitor than I do. First tip, folks, is to go over the rules. And the rules have changed a little bit over the past 5 years, and depending on how aware your advisor is of these rules, you ought to know this going in. First off, whatever you bring, whether it's a computer with a presentation or a poster board or some really elaborate model, you have to be able to carry it in with you. And carrying it in with you is important because you also want to think about how long the darn thing's going to take to set up. Your 15-minute presentation time includes the setup and the teardown. So you don't want something so elaborate that you can't get the darn thing set up. If you have a presentation that you're going to need a tripod or an easel for, you can carry the tripod or easel in already assembled, and then you just put your presentation on that. So let's review. You need to be able to carry it in. If you're using a laptop, please do not plan for there to be power or Wi-Fi. In my state conference center, there's Wi-Fi, but it's terrible. So DECA says we cannot guarantee you Wi-Fi or power, so plan around that. And if you're going to think about some sort of elaborate technological presentation, if it includes sound, it can't be so loud that it distracts the judge of the people around you. So I would include no sound or minimal sound at best so that the focus is really on you during the presentation. So to review, hand carry, no power or Wi-Fi because you're not going to be able to do it, and your setup time and your teardown time is included in that 15 minutes. The second tip is whether you're going to have a digital presentation versus a physical or an analog presentation. Digital presentations are very easy for many of you to put together, but sometimes you get so focused in what that digital presentation looks like and how fancy or how sophisticated it is that it might hide your overall message as you present. For some of you who are considering an in-person or physical presentation, you have to be really precise with your level of skill with putting together a really good-looking presentation or poster board. So you also want to make sure that you work to your skill set. No presentation can stand in the way of you and your information. The presentation should be there to supplement. So if your digital presentation is going to make it harder for you to communicate, don't do a digital presentation. If your physical presentation is just going to be all this wow factor, but you're not really using the information, I wouldn't consider going with a physical or analog display. Use what's going to make your presentation stand out. Think about how you're going to present too. The next tip is whether you should sit or stand for your written event presentation. Folks have seen them both, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but whether you sit or stand is really what you're more comfortable with, how you're going to present better. If you present really well standing up and you can stand still and you can look at the things on your display board and point them out to the judge, that's a really great way to present. If you sit down, because it makes it a little bit more focused and it gives you a little bit more control over the presentation, sit down to present. Don't try to work outside of your comfort zone. Do something that's going to allow you to manage your notes and be able to present to your best. Now, if you sit down to present, it doesn't mean you need to have a digital presentation. And if you stand up to present, it doesn't mean you have to present a physical presentation. Think about what's going to make you most comfortable and then work to your strengths. The last thing I'll say about whether you should sit or stand or have a physical or digital presentation is think about how you're going to get it to your state conference. I've had students create really elaborate poster boards and then have to worry about flying with them on a plane. I have students this year who are going to create a model of a presentation, but then they have to think about how they're going to get it on the bus and hopefully get it on a plane to get to ICDC. So think about how you're going to travel with your presentation too. My hunch is that many students this year will do a digital presentation. If you want to stand out, try to do something a bit more creative. The next tip is to design a color template. Design a color theme that's going to make your presentation stand out. And I've seen a lot of them already designed in your written event papers. So take the written event color template that you use in your paper and pull it into the design of your digital or physical presentation. It's a little easier to do that in a digital presentation because you have the design template and all the colors already laid out. If you choose the right color design theme, it's going to really pull together well your written paper and the work that the judge sees in front of him or her on that presentation day. The next tip, folks, is to exude confidence. I know that some of you do the written paper event because you don't like preparing for an unknown role play, and I get it, neither would I. But some of the tips that you would have for the role play really apply here. The judge gets 15 minutes with you, and the judge will probably never see you again. So, go into this presentation like you're going into a role play. Exude confidence. Really get into that role. Really be a little bit bigger than you typically are personality-wise, and really show that off to the judge. Exude confidence. If you go in thinking that you're going to win Deck of Glass this year, you're more likely to win Deck of Glass this year. If you go in feeling nervous or unconfident, it's going to come off. So pretend that you are a Deck of Glass winner, and your confidence will shine. Now, the last tip I have for you is really just another pull-in from some of the role play tips I give to some students. Leave something behind for the judge. Now, I know, the judge has your written event paper, and the written event is probably in front of them, but it might not be. So a lot of states this year are uploading their written events digitally, and the judge is going to read and score them in advance, so the judge isn't going to have your physical paper in front of them. If you leave something with the judge is going to be more likely to remember you after a day's worth of competition. So what should you leave? Probably not a business card. A lot of students in a role play will make a business card or a graph to leave with the judge. I would think of something creative that you can leave the judge that encapsulates your project. Maybe not your whole executive summary again, but something quick, something smart, something designed around your color theme. I will tell you that as a teacher, when I evaluate students' work, whatever I read in the beginning of my grading time is easy to forget as I move forward. If a judge sees your presentation in the beginning and your presentation is really good, it's possible that the judge forgets how good that was throughout the day. But if you give the judge something that they hold on to, then as the judge progresses throughout the day, they'll see that thing that you give them and be like, oh wow, theirs is really good. So if you're doing a model, maybe leave them a CAD design of the model that you've done. Or if you've got a really cool logo and a really cool design, leave them that. If you have an Instagram page that you want to highlight, leave them a little business card with the Instagram so they can connect to that. So leave something with your judge so the judge remembers you. It's going to pay off for those times where the judge remembers your awesome presentation and when they're trying to compare it to the ones that they just saw. Now folks, it is 2022, and before we're done this video, we need to remember we're still in the middle of a pandemic. And states are requiring different things of their DECA competitors. Some of you might be doing your state conference virtually still, or you might have a more digital component to it. Think about that as you prepare. If you need virtual presentation tips, I'll link my video above to give you more of those details. If your conference is going to be in person, and I believe ICDC will be in person, there's a very good chance that you will be masked. If you're going to be masked for your written event presentations, there's something you need to really consider, and that's how you project your voice. I have a lot of students in class that I can't hear them from across the room when they talk to me through their mask. If you think about how you're going to stand up and what that's going to look like when you present, think about how loud you are with your mask. Let's presume you're standing up presenting to your judge and you have a mask on. We all know the complications. First off, it's harder to hear me. I'm a bit more muffled, but the room is quiet. Let's add in some background noise because your state or ICDC presentations are going to be in a louder conference room, so add some background noise in. Now the judge can't see your lips moving. You might not be able to hear their questions after they ask you, and there's a lot of noise going on. All those things together, folks, might mean I might recommend sitting to do your presentations this year. If you stand up, you're another couple feet removed from the judge. If you sit down, you're closer, and that closer might just make it a little bit easier to hear you or a little bit easier for you to hear the judge. Just something to consider as you get into the presentations this year.
And folks, before we go, since I changed the name of the YouTube channel to Bowtie Goat, I'd like to highlight the bow ties that I've got. My bow tie that I'm wearing this week comes from H-Bomb Bow Ties. It's a great company that supports a family who's trying to support their child. I've got the donut bow tie that I'm wearing today, but I found this bow tie company sort of by chance. The story is that a husband and wife wanted to find a way to help their son Harrison, who has Down syndrome and autism, find a way to contribute and have meaningful work. And they have Harrison curate these bow ties for sale on their site. They don't make the bow ties, they just are like a distributor of really cool bow ties. I've always loved the quality and the craftsmanship of the bow ties, and they've held up well over the last couple of years. Take a look at hbombowties.com.
There it is, folks, your DECA written event presentation guide and all the tips that you need to master those presentations. Good luck this year in your written event presentations. I look forward to seeing you all on ICDC, and good luck on your DECA success journey.